There are moments in life when silence says more than words ever could. For Clara Bennett, silence had become the sound of her hum, a quiet hum that filled every hallway, every corner, and every memory. Once laughter had lived there. Once the walls had carried music, the smell of fresh coffee, and her husband's deep voice calling from the kitchen. But that was before the accident. Before Michael's car went off the road on a rainy evening 2 years ago and never came back. Now it's just Clara and her son, Ethan. Ethan was 20, now tall, quiet, with a gentle face that reminded her so much of his father it sometimes hurt to look at him. He had always been her light, her reason to keep moving. But lately, even that light seemed dimmer. He avoided her eyes. His smiles were faint and fleeting. Some nights she heard him pacing in his room, the floorboards creaking softly until dawn. Clara told herself it was normal. Young people went through phases, didn't they? They needed space, independence. Yet a mother always feels when something deeper stirs beneath the surface. Each morning, she'd make breakfast like clockwork: scrambled eggs, toast, a glass of orange juice, and wait at the table, hoping he might sit and talk like he used to. But he'd grab his bag, mumble, "I'm late, Mom," and leave before she could ask a single question. When the door closed, the house felt bigger than before. Colder, somehow. Clara tried to fill her days volunteering at the library, taking long walks by the lake, joining a community art class on Thursdays. But no matter where she went, her thoughts circled back to Ethan. Something had changed in him, something he wasn't ready to share. One evening, as she tidied up the kitchen, she noticed Ethan's old sketchbook on the counter. He used to draw constantly as a boy: dragons, spaceships, portraits of their family dog. But after Michael's passing, he'd stopped completely. Seeing the sketchbook there, worn and smudged with pencil marks, felt like a small miracle. Maybe he was drawing again. Maybe he was healing. Curiosity tugged gently at her heart. She opened it. The pages were filled with faces, soft pencil lines, expressive eyes, and emotions that leaped off the paper. But one face appeared again, and again: a young woman with kind eyes and a faint smile. Under one drawing, a line of writing caught her attention. "She listens when no one else does." Clara's chest tightened. Who was she? A friend? Someone special? She flipped another page. Another sketch. Another note. "She makes the dark days lighter." The words were tender, raw, and full of feeling. Clara felt something between worry and wonder rise inside her. She wasn't angry or jealous, only curious. After all, it had been so long since she'd seen Ethan truly feel something. That night, she waited for him to come home. The clock ticked past 9, then 10. Finally, the door opened. Ethan stepped in, shoulders heavy, hair damp from the rain. He looked surprised to see her still awake. "Hey, Mom," he said, hanging his jacket. "Hey," she replied softly. "Long day." "Yeah," he hesitated, glancing toward the living room, then his room. "Just tired." She wanted to ask about the girl and his drawings, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she simply said, "Dinner's in the oven if you're hungry." "Thanks," he murmured, giving a faint smile before disappearing down the hallway. When his door closed, Clara stood in the quiet again. Only this time, the silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy. Like the air before a storm, something was happening in her son's world, and she wasn't part of it. Not yet. As she turned off the lights and climbed into bed, her mind wouldn't rest. Who was the girl who made her son draw again? And why did his eyes, once so full of light, now carry so much sorrow? She didn't know it yet, but her search for those answers was about to change everything. To be continued in Part 2. The next morning, the sound of rain tapping against the window pulled Clara Bennett out of her restless sleep. The house smelled faintly of coffee. Ethan must have already left for class. On the table sat his empty mug and a small sketch he'd left behind. It was of the same girl. Only this time, the expression was different, softer. Almost sad. Clara traced the lines of the drawing with her finger, remembering the boy Ethan used to be, the one who'd leave doodles on napkins, paint the garage door just to make her laugh, and stay up late helping his father fix old furniture. The memories came rushing back like a tide she couldn't stop. Back then, before the accident, their home had been full of laughter and warmth. Michael would come home with flowers for her every Friday. Ethan would play music too loud in his room, and she'd scold them both for turning the kitchen into a mess during their pancake experiments. It was chaotic, but it was love. The simple, everyday kind that builds quietly over time. But after Michael was gone, something inside Ethan dimmed. He stopped painting, stopped smiling. The light in his eyes, the one that used to mirror his father's, seemed to fade. Clara tried everything to bring it back. Movie nights, trips to the lake, family dinners. But grief has a way of building invisible walls, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't climb over his dot. Now, looking at the sketchbook, Clara realized something. The girl Leela, as she would soon learn, was the first thing to reach Ethan in years. The first person to draw him out of the silence. And though Clara didn't know who Leela was, she could feel her presence through his art. It was as if Ethan's soul was speaking again. One pencil stroke at a time, later that week, Clara found herself driving through town. The same route she and Ethan used to take to school when he was little. She remembered how he'd chatter about everything: his favorite teachers, his drawings, the stories he made up about clouds looking like dragons. He'd always been an old soul with a tender heart. At a stoplight, she glanced at the passenger seat beside her, empty now but heavy with memories. She could almost hear his young voice saying, "Mom, when I grow up, I want to make people feel something when they look at my art." She smiled sadly. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped believing that was possible. That evening, when Ethan came home, Clara decided not to ask questions. Instead, she warmed his favorite soup and set 2 bowls on the table. When he sat down, surprised but grateful, she said gently, "You used to draw every night after dinner. I missed seeing you do that." Ethan paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Yeah," he said softly. "I stopped for a while. But you're drawing again?" she said with a smile that carried more hope than words. He nodded slowly. "There's someone I met who helped me remember why I loved it. Someone special?" Clara asked, careful to sound curious, not prying. Ethan hesitated, his eyes drifting to the sketchbook near his bag. "She's just someone who understands. We met at a grief group. Her brother was there after their dad passed away. Sheila used to wait outside, sketching in her notebook. One day I asked if I could see what she was drawing. She showed me, and I realized we were both trying to find color in a world that suddenly felt gray." Clara listened quietly, her heart full. "She doesn't talk much about herself," Ethan continued, "but she listens. And when she smiles, it's like everything heavy just fades for a moment." He stopped, realizing how much he'd revealed. "It's not what you think, Mom. It's not." Clara raised a hand gently. "I know. It doesn't have to be anything more than what it is. It sounds like you've found someone who makes you feel seen. That's rare, Ethan." He looked down, emotion flickering in his eyes. "I just wish I could do something for her, too." She smiled softly. "Maybe you already are." That night, after he went to bed, Clara sat alone in the living room, the rain still whispering against the windows. She thought about love, the quiet kind that doesn't need to be spoken to be real, the kind that lives in gestures, in memories, in the spaces between words. And as she watched the light from Ethan's room spill faintly into the hallway, she realized that maybe this was how healing began, not all at once, but slowly, through the people who remind us that we're still capable of feeling something beautiful again. Spring came softly that year, washing away the grayness that had clung to Clara Bennett's home for far too long. The cherry trees outside began to bloom, their petals floating past her kitchen window like quiet promises of renewal. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel so heavy. Ethan was changing too. He spent his evenings at his desk sketching again, his music low, his spirit calmer. But there was something new about him, focus. A light that flickered in his eyes whenever his phone buzzed or when he glanced at the small drawing pinned above his workspace. Clara knew whose face it was: Leela's. Life had found a gentle rhythm again, until one afternoon fate decided to interrupt. Clara was leaving the grocery store when she noticed a girl sitting alone on a nearby bench. pale and fragile, holding a sketchbook. For a moment she thought she must be mistaken. But when the girl lifted her head, Clara recognized her instantly. It was Leela, the same girl from Ethan's drawings. Something in Clara's heart told her to walk over. Leela, she asked softly. The girl blinked, startled. "Yes, I'm Clara Bennett," she said gently. "Ethan's mother?" A slow, surprised smile formed on Lila's lips. "Oh, he talks about you all the time." They sat together for a while, the spring breeze weaving between their words. Clara noticed how frail Leela looked, her hands trembling slightly as she held her sketchbook. But her eyes, those soft brown eyes, held warmth and courage beyond her years. "I wanted to thank you," Clara said finally. "You brought something back in my son that I thought I'd lost forever." Lila looked down, a faint blush touching her cheeks. "He did the same for me," she whispered. "After my brother passed, I didn't think I'd draw again. But Ethan, he reminded me that even when life breaks you, there's beauty left to be found." The two women sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that didn't hurt. Then Leela's phone buzzed. Ethan's name flashed across the screen. She smiled at Clara, then answered. "Hey," she said softly. "You'll never guess who I just met." Clara could hear the faint sound of Ethan's laughter on the other end, surprised and full of life. That evening, when Ethan returned home, his steps were lighter than they'd been in years. "You met her," he said, his voice half in awe. Clara smiled. "I did. She's even kinder than your drawings." He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "She's something else, isn't she?" "She is," Clara agreed. Then she added quietly, "And so are you." In the days that followed, their home began to change again, not with noise or chaos, but with life. Ethan invited Lila over sometimes, and Clara would listen from the kitchen as they talked about art, loss, and the small things that made the world beautiful again. There was no romance in the air, at least not in the ordinary sense. What existed between them was deeper than that. It was a kind of understanding that went beyond words. The quiet companionship of two hearts learning how to live again. Then, one Sunday morning, fate played its final hand. Lila stopped by unexpectedly, holding a sealed envelope and a small framed drawing. "It's for you," she told Clara with a tired smile. Clara frowned gently. "Are you all right, dear?" Lila hesitated. "I just wanted to say goodbye. My treatment's starting out of state next week. I don't know when I'll be back." Clara hugged her tightly, tears welling up. "You've already given us more than you know," she whispered. That night, after Lila left, Ethan found the framed picture on the table. It was a sketch of their family, Clara, Ethan, and Michael, drawn from an old photo. Beneath it, in Lila's delicate handwriting, were the words, "Love never leaves. It only changes form." Months later, Lila's messages stopped coming, but her memory stayed. Ethan's art blossomed. He opened community workshops for grieving teens, helping others find healing through creativity. Clara volunteered there too, serving tea, watching the young faces light up with hope. Sometimes, when the sun streamed through the studio windows, Clara would see a faint shimmer in the air like the reflection of cherry blossoms falling outside, and she'd think of Lila, of how one person, through quiet kindness, had changed lives forever. And as Ethan painted, his mother would smile softly, realizing the truth of it all. Love doesn't end when life changes. Sometimes it just finds a new way to stay.